think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good evening, you're with GB News. In a moment, headliners, but first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines. And the Prime Minister has confirmed it is accelerating the delivery of military equipment to Ukraine so it arrives in country in a matter of weeks instead of months. In his address to Parliament today, President Zelensky requested British fighter jets to bolster Ukraine's defences against Russia. Soon he's expected to meet the French President, Emmanuel Macron, and the German Chancellor in Paris. And speaking at a military base in Dorset earlier on this afternoon, Rishi Sunak said nothing was off the table in terms of military assistance.
All over the United Kingdom, Ukrainian men and women are learning how to command and control NATO standard weapons, whether that is in drone warfare, tank operations, or basic training. Their dedication, courage, and determination is a credit to you and your country. And Volodymyr, your visit here today underlines our two countries' close and enduring friendship. We will always be by your side, your staunch and unwavering friends.
Meanwhile, governments and aid organisations from around the world are offering support to Turkey and Syria after the two devastating earthquakes killed more than 12,000 people in both countries. The Foreign Office says 3 British people are still missing following the disaster. And Downing Street said this afternoon the UK will continue to assess the situation and stands ready to provide further long-term assistance as and when it's needed. The partner of the missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, has visited the riverbank in Lancashire where she vanished. Paul Ansell went to the field where her phone and dog were found near the River Wyre as police continued their 12th day of the search. Nicola went missing while taking her dog for a walk and after dropping her children off at school. Meanwhile, the private underwater rescue team that's been helping police has now pulled out of the search. The former Labour MP, Jared Amara, has been found guilty of 6 counts of fraud, all committed whilst he was in office. The 41-year-old, who was a Member of Parliament between 2017 and 2019, was on trial for submitting fake invoices to Parliament worth around £24,000 to fund a cocaine habit. A jury cleared him of 2 other charges and sentencing will take place tomorrow at Leeds Crown Court. The NHS says patients are being hit hard by recent strike action. Data published by NHS England shows at least 137,000 appointments have been delayed due to industrial action over the last 2 months, with more than 49,000 postponed because of strikes early this week. Nurses, paramedics and physiotherapists have been on strike intermittently over the last few weeks, following disagreements with the government over pay and conditions. You're up to date on GB News, on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is the People's Channel, where now it's time for Headliners.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Tonight we'll be taking a look at Thursday's newspapers, or indeed this morning we will be if you're watching the repeat. Joining me tonight, or tomorrow morning, or now at any rate, is Leo McDaddy Curse and Nick the Big Dog Dixon. It's the A-team. So let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages. We start with the Daily Mail, as is traditional. Now, give him the wings he needs for freedom. Do we have an image to go with that? Yes, we do. There it is. Give him the wings he needs for freedom. Give him an outsized helmet as well. Rishi Sunak and Vladimir Zelensky there sporting the lace in would-be fighting headgear. Telegraph, give him wings for freedom as well. Very similar headline. The iPaper, UK warns Putin we may send fighter jets to protect Ukraine. They've taken their helmets off on this occasion. The Mirror, I'd say, give us your wings for freedom. I wonder whether there was some sort of deal going on this headline. The Times, I can't believe it. Give us our wings for freedom. That is Zelensky again in Churchillian mode there. And finally, the Daily Star bucking the trend order of the Wazzock. Give MPs a medal and a £162,000 payout when they are booted out. Say, you'll never guess, MPs. Those are your front pages. So we begin with the Mail, Leo, although to be fair, of course, it could have been any single one of those newspapers.
Yeah, all the newspapers are leading with this. So the Daily Mail says, now give him the wings he needs for freedom, because Ukraine is now sponsored by Red Bull. So it's not, it's sponsored by Monster, much tougher stuff. But yeah, Zelensky was over in the UK. He's asking for fighter jets. He's already got tanks. So we're ramping up the sort of level of the. It used to be quite defensive stuff and handheld stuff like the Stinger missiles and the anti-tank things, and now we're getting more, bigger, more offensive weaponry. And the trouble with fighter jets is they're logistically really complex and complicated, and you've got to train for a long time to use them. And Russia's got a spring offensive planned in a couple of months, whenever spring starts.
Could be even sooner. I remember this time last year, because the troops were massing on the border, and there was a lot of discussion then about the climatic conditions having to be acceptable for an invasion to take place. It turns out they'd underestimated the extent to which their machinery had fallen apart since it was last used anyway. But
but the West has this sort of strategy of sort of teasing the war out. So we're just sort of feeding Zelensky, feeding Ukraine, bits of weaponry, piece by piece. So it's keeping the war at a kind of stalemate when we could just finish it, very easily. Like we're the West. Nobody beats the West.
Moscow, you mean?
No, we're not. We don't need to nuke Moscow. Just a decisive victory in the battlefield. But what the West wants to tease it out. It's quite sick, quite cynical, because they want to deplete Russia militarily and deplete Putin.
Exhausting them. I suppose the danger, the fear would be then if these jets are going to be supplied, they'll have to supply pilots as well, or at least certainly personnel to train people.
We're already training Ukrainian pilots, so it's pretty obvious that they're going to get jets at some point. We're not training them to sit in a boxcar and pretend they're flying one.
So it turns out that last year's hit movie, Top Gun 2, was Maverick, was not in fact the swan song we thought and feared it might be. It's not only a world for drones now.
I missed Maverick. Was it good?
Oh, it was pretty good, but the kind of subtext was that jet pilots were like the 20th century knights in armour, that nowadays everything was controlled from a base by a man with a mouse.
Yeah. Well, Leo's very sort of pro-Zelensky, and we know about broadcast regulations, so that dictates, for balance, I have to be pro-Putin. It's a tricky one for me.
You've got to be a Putin apologist. That's what they always are.
I know, that's what they call me on Twitter. No, they don't. But I do feel bad for Putin. He's got those massive tables, and then you've got to move house. It's a nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's my balance provided.
Imagine getting one of them down the stairs.
But, on a serious note, I do wonder, our own top military people have said our military is not capable of even defending ourselves.
Yeah.
So one does wonder how we're going to win a war in Ukraine.
What we're going to do,
of course, isn't it?
What we're going to do is we're going to pay BAE Systems and all these other fantastic weapons manufacturers that we've got, Rolls-Royce, to build this new stuff, to build this new gear. And this is, when we're giving, a lot of people moan, especially on the right, people moan, why are we giving Ukraine all this money? We should be feeding the homeless or whatever. But I mean, we're not really giving them money. We're saving ourselves money, because otherwise this stuff would be in storage here and we'd be spending money to keep it.
So we freed up some big yellow storage facilities.
Exactly.
We're keeping our jets.
And we can get newer and better stuff.
I mean, I have to say, America is also supplying Ukraine with a huge amount of arms, weaponry in one kind or another, and it's part of their strategy for the last 50 years at least, isn't it? 70 years, I think. The military-industrial complex, permanent war for permanent peace, keeps people employed. It's worked very well for them. Maybe it is about time that Britain got on board with that.
Well, I'm one of these hippies that wants to just end the war, Simon, just end it. That's my position.
Yeah, but you can't negotiate peace with somebody like Putin. He has to be destroyed and crushed into the tundra.
Well, we've been around this a few times, but there doesn't feel like there's ever been a moment when it was likely to be negotiated out.
Yeah.
At this point, he is probably going to. It is going to go to an ultimate crushing. It's video game mode, isn't it? Boom, 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 boom.
I do just.
How is it
find
won, though, in an era of nuclear weapons? How is it won?
How is it won? Honestly, nuclear weapons are really off the table. Putin can't use nuclear weapons without completely annihilating Russia and himself. And I think, as much as the people around him, the command structure that he's got, they'll do what he says up to a point. They won't annihilate their own families because some weird old guy says so.
I've got to be honest, one of the things that concerns me is that I do think there is a certain amount of sentiment that wants to see Putin gone, to see him punished ultimately, to see him either kicked out of power, very possibly held up in some sort of international war crimes court or whatever. I can't remember the last time somebody like Putin was removed from power in somewhere like Russia and replaced with something better.
Ceausescu?
It never happens. Ceausescu, that probably was about the last time, wasn't it? Yeah, so it was in 91, over 30 years ago.
But I find it very strange that people on the right, throughout lockdown, I was on their side because we're fighting for freedom in this country. Now they've sort of transferred that to supporting Putin, some of them, and I find it very strange. They say things... They say things to me like, Ukraine's full of neo-Nazis and white supremacists and racists. I already like Ukraine. Stop convincing me.
That sounds like a straw man of people's position. I mean, there's serious people like Peter Hitchens who talk about ways we could try and end the war without being Putin apologists.
I have to say, it is extraordinary how many of the people who have opposing political views to you have this ridiculous way of talking.
They do.
You should find yourself.
That's what they sound like.
I'm a straw man.
Can we have a look at the Financial Times now? Who has been drafted with that one?
So I've got the Adani story.
Okay.
So this is the Adani Group. This is an Indian huge, conglomerate company. It controls ports, energy, mines. It's all around the world. It's got mines in Australia and stuff. But they were worth in November 2022. They were worth $280 billion. So this is a big. This is a big deal. That's about 6 Twitters. So now they're sitting on they've lost $100 billion of market value. They're down, less than half what they were in November. In fact, they've lost $140 billion of market value because this short seller, this really small investment firm, Hindenburg Research, said it had done analysis on Adani Group. Hindenburg, which is, would you want to invest in that? It's like, that doesn't sound like a safe...
Humanity,
They're short sellers. So they like it when something goes down in flames because they make a lot of money from companies collapsing. So it's interesting. They've released a report that says, the Adani Group they've been doing accounting fraud and they're sitting on all these losses, and that's led to an absolute slump in the Adani Group share price, which they're making a lot of money off. Is Hindenburg Research, are they amping it up to make more money? Can you trust...
I find that a very provocative, dramatic name, the Hindenburg. Bring you down
Titanic fund management.
Extraordinary. And have you got something on the Call of Duty there, Nick?
Yes, I've got the nerd story. Yeah, Watchdog threatens Microsoft's $75 billion mission to enlist Call of Duty maker, and it's this merger or potential merger between Activision Blizzard and Microsoft. And the Competition and Markets Authority don't like it because they say it could end up with Call of Duty only being available on Xbox, and that wouldn't be right. But the problem is, some people say this will impact our games market and that we're trying to be Silicon Valley. We'll end up Death Valley because if we try and block this, the US big boys are threatening us because it's worth $5 billion a year.
It's an extraordinary amount of money, isn't it? I know we've been talking about it for years, the fact that the games industry is bigger than Hollywood now, but it's still absolutely mind-boggling the amount of money people spend. I suppose it's the copyright control that, as much as anything, elevates it, because Hollywood content, as we call it now, becomes free very, very quickly, doesn't it? But it doesn't seem to you know what I mean? Like movies and books and everything.
I think it's very easy to transfer intellectual property in Hollywood to another studio, but with something like Call of Duty, the whole building a computer game is like building a submarine. There's so many processes involved and all the technology, all the layers of technology that it sits on.
Maybe we should give some of those to Zelensky as well, then, if it's like a submarine. It could be...
Well, I think a lot
of Call of Duty. Have a go on this.
Gradually shift both sides into thinking they're carrying on. Just working
a lot of they've got a lot of sort of guided drones and guided missiles that are like Call of Duty levels, where you got the goggles on and you're literally flying it into a tank.
Well, we do hear a lot. I'm sure this is a story that crops up every so often of young men who have basically trained themselves to be high-level weapons operatives just on video games.
Yeah.
Like the other fellow who's running a football team. That's right, a football manager. So let's finish off
like
with
women saying the models
the Star,
on Instagram,
which is the only other newspaper not to be carrying a direct Zelensky quote.
Yeah, they've got Order of the Wazak. And this is about medals. So MPs, as you said in your intro, have said that MPs should get more money when they leave. They should get a special medal, and they should get 162 grand. Because they've been hanging out in Brussels. They've been speaking to German MPs or whatever they still call MPs in Germany. It's a weird country. And anyway, it turns out they get like 162,000 if they've served 18 years, whereas we get something like 5,250. Exactly. Which is equivalent to 1 month's salary. So obviously our MPs are going, hang on, guys, what's going on here? Even Australians get between 31 and 62,000. That's not even a proper country. So
in Germany and Australia, they do a much better job.
Well, this is
they're not tanking.
It's argument, isn't it? It's the dog before the cart or whatever. But the problem is, I would like to see MPs better remunerated in this country. I would like to see it elevated to a high status role. That the best people will come out of university and think, you know what, I might have a crack at politics because I can make some money there and make a name for myself and not just be humiliated and egged.
Yes.
But you've got to create the incentives and then get new people in. You can't have the people in there voting themselves a golden handshake or whatever, or a golden, you want to mean?
Yes, I agree. In general, politicians, especially the Prime Minister, should be paid more, yet this story is still annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. So they've got to set it up, say the term after next, there'll be a whole new batch of rules. and anyone who comes in and is elected in that time.
Competent people only from 2024.
But the trouble is that makes it a career, makes it a job, and I think careerist politicians, people who do it without any experience of the business world, make terrible politicians.
They should have experience first, but then get paid more when they get it.
Yeah. And, well, maybe we'll just go back to the House of Lords and just make it property owners. I mean, that seemed to work. We run the wall in those days. Anyway, so now you know what the front pages are all about. Join us after the break. We've got good news for the UK. Well, kind of. Double standards in anti-terrorism, no surprise, and a surge in young people claiming to be disabled. See you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans, and on my left, Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon, ready to get stuck in. We start, Leo, with the Daily Mail and perhaps the weakest dose of good news you can get this side of an actual placebo.
Yeah, so Britain will avoid a recession this year, but it will still feel like one for households struggling with the cost of living, according to a think tank. So this is better news than the other week the IMF said that Britain's going to have a recession. It's going to be the worst performing economy in the G7. And now these people, the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, say that we're not going to have a recession.
Which is actually, funny enough, is short for nicer.
Nicer.
You pronounce that.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
is appropriate.
I pronounce it Neezer.
Yeah, no, it's nicer. They give you
Neezer
nicer
Mother
news.
Brown. But yeah, so 7 million UK households won't earn enough to cover all their planned energy and food bills over the coming year. As inflation continues to bite. I'm not sure they're right about that. I think inflation's coming down. It's more of a, inflation was more of a supply problem. So, and especially with, some people getting fired and going into the economy, it's going to free up the labour market and stop that pressure.
Some people have a bit too much money. I think that's mostly gone now, isn't it? I think
well, that's the most Thatcherite thing I've ever heard you say. People had too much money. Got to take it off, snatch that milk out their hands, Simon.
The last few months have certainly rebalanced that problem.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether to be confident. I mean, we'll avoid a recession, but it'll still feel like one. It's like saying you won't be sexually assaulted, but it'll feel like you have been.
Yeah.
Is it any better? You know, it's a sort of philosophical question. But the argument here is between whether we'll actually have a recession or whether we'll have growth or not, but it'll still feel like, because of inflation, it'll still feel like we haven't. So it's kind of academic to me anyway. You know, the Bank of England is more pessimistic, but even the optimistic version is it'll still feel like we've had a recession.
But they do, I mean, obviously, you know, market sentiment and consumer sentiment, very important. We had, I don't know, you were a young man, but the feel-good factor was discussed a lot in the early years of the Blair administration. He came in and he timed it perfectly because actually Ken Clarke had got the economy pretty square and he inherited a good time, and immediately everyone just started feeling great, spending lots of money. It became a very virtuous circle. But you do kind of get that at the peak of like a boom, and then, you know, the business cycle, we all understand you go back into recession. My beef is that I don't think we had a feel-good factor. The previous, I don't remember ever having one.
We never got it.
That was lockdown.
There was a crash, and then it's just been miserable ever since.
And to be very fair, Liz Truss tried her best. She's back, isn't she, with her recent statement. And actually, it says, as it says here, with corporation tax set to rise is one of the reasons for the economy's weakness. She actually wanted to freeze it at 19% and not have that raise. And now people are starting to go, hang on, Truss had a point on something.
Yeah, and freezing tax bans, you know, so even though the thresholds for income tax and other taxes aren't going up, they're still going up in real terms because inflation is pushing more and more people over the threshold.
Absolutely. I think they're going to turn it around in time for the election. There will be a little bit of an adjustment in those cases.
A late sprint.
We have another story in the Telegraph now, Nick. No one's great surprise. Prevent might have been better named Avoid by the sound of it.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. It seems like Prevent aren't preventing enough, and in some cases they're actively abetting, which we'll get onto. But yes, it's right-wing terror. Well, that's typo on the headline, so I won't read that. But basically, it's a review that's found Prevent has operated with a double standard. This is William Shawcross, who's done this review, and he's saying that when it comes to right-wing stuff, they use a very broad definition, but when it comes to Islamist terror, they sort of ignore a lot of it. So even though 80% of live investigations with the counter-terror police are from Islamist plots, only 22% of Prevent referrals were from that. So there's something clearly going wrong here. And the really just astonishing part is that in some cases, Prevent gave taxpayers money to Islamist groups that have supported the Taliban. So it's like you had one job. It's in your name. It's not called fund terror. It's not called fund terrorism. It's called
This is the one thing we didn't want to happen. That's what Morris might have said.
That is mind-boggling.
No, it is extraordinary. And obviously, you know, there are the self-defined, self-elected, self-appointed community leaders who can oh, don't worry, I have the ear of the Muslim neighbourhood.
I do Scotland. I'm the spokesman for Scotland.
They also, though, have, I mean, it's the usual thing, as it was with the grooming gangs, fear of Islamophobia. You have to recognise and applaud, to some extent, Islam's PR over the last 20 or 30 years. It's been extraordinarily successful.
Well, the Macpherson report that basically told all public institutions, you know, you've got to be so careful of racism. Racism, the worst thing you can possibly do, really, you know, did that. But it'd be interesting to see how public opinion to immigration would change if the police if they stopped thwarting terror attacks, Islamist terror attacks. I mean, at the moment, they're putting so much effort, so much money into stopping them. But, you know, we've sort of invited people from cultures that, you know, don't necessarily love Western liberal democracy. You know, people have come here and now we've got this problem with Islamist terror. Well, the sort of public opinion is still OK because we're doing all this work to suppress the actual terror.
Because they're not seeing exactly how risky it is. But the long-term hope, of course, is that they're just won over by consumerism, because obviously we don't have any sort of really very powerful alternative cultural...
Well, it sounds more effective than Prevent, to be honest.
I think it is. Shop. Leo, over to The Guardian. It sounds like the general drift towards literally everyone being registered disabled has taken another significant plunge.
Yeah, that's right. So there's been a surge in young people declaring themselves disabled in England and Wales. So this comes after the 2021 census included mental health in its question about disability for the first time. So 1 in 7 women in their 20s have been classed as disabled because, you know, you can just say, oh, I've got depression, I've got ADHD, I've got, you know, anything that all, you know, millennials and Zoomers seem to be suffering from. We've made it very easy to become disabled because of and ADHD. It's like people want to get diagnosed with ADHD. All my friends have been diagnosed with ADHD because then they get NHS grade speed for free on a prescription.
It's a scam to some extent.
Yeah, and then you can do all...
They're all speed freaks, is what you've just said.
Basically,
well, comedians, comedians do love it because they have all got it, obviously.
And it's also, we've made it desirable to sort of, have some sort of mental health issue that's not too onerous, not too taxing, because it gives you a place on the oppression pyramid.
Not too stabby.
Yeah. It gives you a place. It gives you something to say. I'm a comedian with ADHD, or I've got this. It's like being, genderqueer or something like that.
To be clear on this, so it's saying 1.2 million people now, aged 10 to 24 in England and Wales, declare themselves disabled. That's more than double the number a decade ago.
Yeah.
They can't all be claiming disability benefit, I would hope. It's a different sort of criteria, sort of context.
This is sort of self-identified as disabled.
More just like a survey generally.
So they haven't convinced a doctor.
This comes from a radical shifting of the goalposts. It says the increase comes, because they've included mental health for the first time. And this is in The Guardian. And by the way, it turns out reading The Guardian counts as a mental illness in this survey as well. That's all I had, really.
So, Nick, let's come to you now. The Times, and at least one man whom many suspect of being severely diminished, if not actually disabled, he denies there's anything to worry about.
Yeah, old Joe Biden. Yeah, so this is the address. What's it called? State of the Union. Very important. Good. That's the key part of the story. And he said, let me finish the job. And he's clearly indicated that he's going to run again. He's talked about this blue-collar blueprint for America, which almost sounds a bit Trumpian. And he's claiming credit for the economy bouncing back. Really, it's just that it's post-COVID. And that's all that's happened there. But it was quite rowdy. People, what do you call Marjorie Taylor Greene shouted liar. He talked about a young woman who died of a fentanyl overdose and someone shouted, your fault, the border, and things like this. So it got quite wild. And then Sarah Huckabee came up and did the response, and she said that there's no longer a choice between left and right. It's simply normal or crazy. But there was a lot of booing. It was quite, it showed where they are in America. And, he didn't, to me...
I feel like that is unusual. I'm trying to rerun them in the past, but they're normally a bit more dignified.
Yes, I mean, Nancy Pelosi ripped up Trump's speech, which was annoying, but this was proper booing. This was like House of Commons sort of jeering.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's not that surprising because we're used to it, but it does show the escalating of tensions in America. And what Biden tried to do was say, we have to see each other not as enemies, but fellow Americans. People are weary of division. And yet you think, yes, but you've stoked that division by calling Trump supporters semi-fascist.
Well, exactly. He said we overcame the greatest threat to our democracy since the Civil War. Now, if you believe that, and that's the angle you're going to take, then fine. But you can't say that 1 second and then the next minute say, let's join hands across the
even for somebody with, then undergoing the effects of dementia, to say that January the 6th was a serious military coup attempt is ridiculous. When he says, let me finish the job, I'd be amazed if they could finish his lunch.
So we have one little more story I think we can get in before the break. We are going to go to the break next. I apologise. That's part 2 done. We will do that story in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. We'll talk about safe spaces for university students, human clones, and how mining the moon could be the saviour of humanity. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Headliners. Leo, we will do that story now. In the Times, it looks like yet another conspiracy theory is being downgraded to theory.
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends. This guy, this investigative journalist, Seymour Hersh, I mean, he's won Pulitzer Prizes and stuff, but in recent years, he's 85 now, which is actually older than Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And in recent years, his journalism has, come under some criticism for being a bit far-fetched and relying on dubious sources. But he says that the US bombed the Nord Stream gas pipeline. Yeah. So I don't know if you remember, a few months ago, last year, whenever it was, the explosions destroyed the pipelines that bring gas from Russia to, I think it's Germany, terminates in. And people assumed, or certainly the media spun this narrative, that it must have been Russia. But then people said, Russia, I mean, there's not very many incentives for Russia to do it. They spent $20 billion building it. They're still making money off it, and they can cut it off anytime they want. They've got the tap, and also they're too incompetent to do, to have divers go down and lay explosives at that depth. Whereas the USA, if the USA blew it up and blamed it on Russia, it would break EU dependency on Russian gas. It would stop that money flowing from the EU to Russia. It would weaken Russia, and also it would mean that the US could sell their gas into Europe and also raise the price of gas. But I mean, it's a theory. And this is, I mean, I know you believe it because you believe all conspiracy theories.
To be fair, it is, I mean, Victoria Nuland and Joe Biden are both literally on YouTube,
saying they're going to do it. Yeah, so that's the thing, is it's not really a conspiracy.
Yeah. No.
They said they were going to do it. At the time, I said there's no way it was Russia. That was sort of it was like pressure on you not to say that kind of thing, or it felt a bit edgy, even though it obviously wasn't. But you're saying his journalism is now frowned upon. That's because all journalism is now frowned upon. Biden said it, and Nuland said it, as you point out. And what's interesting is, why did they say it? You think, it's just Biden being an idiot. No, it claims here, and it makes sense, that it was no longer considered a covert operation, so they didn't have to report it to Congress.
Yes.
So by saying we're just going to do this, it is no longer classed as covert. And Biden said, if Russia invades, there'll no longer be a Nord Stream 2, we'll bring an end to it. So they weren't that subtle about it. So I don't know why that's a conspiracy.
He didn't say we're going to blow it up.
He said put an end to it. Wink, wink. And Nuland said the same.
Mistake,
it was very wink, wink.
Yeah, we will finish this. But he did... I mean, there are a number of possible scenarios. I've seen lots of conversations from people who sounded like they knew what they were talking about. But in this example, he does have some quite detailed... You might say it's information or it might just be fantasy. But he's not just going, I reckon it was the Americans. He's got some quite specific scenarios mapped out involving what sound like Norwegian SEALs, essentially, rather than
actual SEALs.
Yeah,
you give them a herring.
No, like Marines, Norwegian divers and so on.
Yeah.
And quite a convincing and plausible sort of timeline and how it would all have been achieved. The one thing, I mean, he was most famous, he won his Pulitzer for exposing the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, which was one of the biggest stories of the 60s.
That was, that was in the 60s.
Specifically about American... what would have been a conspiracy theory until he proved it was true. The ones that he's been a little bit more dubious about more recently are...
Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden having been captured by Pakistani forces and held for ransom for many years before he was finally assassinated or whatever. And that was quite interesting. But also about casting doubt on Syria and whether it was Assad who used the chemical weapons, the gas on his own people, which... I've seen, again, plenty of plausible evidence. It doesn't sound total whack job. We're not talking like it's the Rothschilds. Or
this one seems perfectly plausible. Why would Russia do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's no. But then, why would Russia invade Ukraine? It's the most disastrous thing for Putin and Russia that could possibly happen.
So, Nick, we'll go to the Daily Mail now. It seems like the selection criteria for reparations task force might be somewhat slack.
Yeah, Boston Task Force appoints 2 11th graders and a BLM-supporting college student to decide how much money to pay back to the black community. And there I was thinking BLM was a serious organisation, but apparently not. So high school juniors Damani Williams and Denilson Fan, as well as 22-year-old University of Massachusetts student Carrie Mays, who seems to be the new kind of Greta of BLM, really. Right. And they're sort of what's the word, grooming, not in that way, but these young people, because young people are easily brainwashed, so they get these young spokespeople and they say, oh, yeah, Black Lives Matter is a big thing, we must have reparations, and they're all young and don't know anything. It's not particularly surprising.
Well, you wouldn't need much grooming to be convinced you deserve reparations. Yeah, and I think I could probably be persuaded.
But they're the face of it.
But this reparations thing, I mean, because I remember it being reported, they're talking about distributing reparations and it's going to be like hundreds of thousands of dollars for each person. And I was like, well, this is obviously just some nonsense. Some professor's written this on a blog. And no, they're actually doing it.
Yeah, San
This is
Francisco are
madness.
doing it as well. Yeah, it's mad.
Absolute madness.
Extraordinary. It will never end. There will be no hole in that bucket. Thursday's Telegraph now. Leo and Barron, formerly Chris Patton, is giving a well-deserved beating to the universities by the sound of it.
Yeah, so he says safe spaces are mad. He's the chief of Oxford University now. I didn't know they had a chief. I thought it'd be like top professor or something. But yeah,
Marshal.
he's field marshal. That'd be a good one. He says that universities should have an important role in championing free speech and shouldn't be, mollycoddling students by having safe spaces. It says that free speech is one of the most important values in a functioning liberal democratic society, particularly in a university. It says it's oxymoronic because it undermines the ability to have free debate. And, you shouldn't be free. The safe spaces they originated as a place for women and minorities to be free from discrimination. There's this small area where you could go and
well, this is the thing. It's an odd phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, in fact, the phrase, if it were to be used as I would like it to be used, would actually make sense. It should be a space where it's safe to say things and not think that your reputation's going to be scarred
It
forever.
should be an unsafe space.
A place where you can safely exchange ideas without having your...
Yeah, look, this is a good thing. Obviously, it's good whenever someone like Chris Patton or someone weighs in. He says, I'm an old-fashioned liberal. I believe that free speech and tolerance are one of the most important values in an open society. My problem is it's not working. No. We're not winning it. That's why I was talking to Carl Benjamin the other day. He had a more persuasive argument, which was that he favoured postmodern traditionalism, whereby you basically say, we just happen to like free speech. We don't claim it's objectively better. We accept your radical subjectivity and kind of cultural relativism, and we're just saying we happen to like free speech. These are what he called tribal gods. He said, so you have to recognise us as our own particular unique kind of indigenous people.
So now there's a sacred kind of ring around safe space.
Yes, about free speech. You use their argument against them. That seemed more persuasive because we're not winning it with this old liberal argument.
It's true. And Chris Patton, I mean, he's a lovely old geezer, but he is an old geezer, isn't he? He's exactly the sort they've already written off. It's not as if they're going to listen to him like they might do, I don't know.
Leo. They've definitely written Leo off.
Daily Mail now, Nick, and a scientific dream that began with Prince Harry's paranoid delusions for his very essence and his raison d'etre, but it could actually work.
Yeah, human clones, purposefully grown to give people spare parts like hearts, lungs and livers could be the key to living forever. Dr. Alex Zavonkov, perhaps, Zavonkov, some name like that. Anyway, it's a guy who's saying that what we need is human clones. You need to have a clone that's grown separately for 15 to 20 years. And this is where some of you guys might miss out because of age. I'll just make it. But the dark bit is he goes, cloning, in my opinion, is the only way to do it. But he says you'll need many clones. I'm not sure if I could cope with, 10 Leos, but you'll need many clones. But here's where it gets dark. They'll have to disable their cognitive functions so they could only be used for organs. So he's talking about kind of weird, dead-eyed clones sitting there for 20 years waiting for you to borrow an organ from them.
Sort of medically induced coma, basically.
Yes. And it'll be like an iPhone, he thinks. You'll just be able to upgrade and get your spare liver or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's pretty dark, but at the same time, I'd like to be front of the queue.
I mean, Katsuo Ishiguro, I think he's pronounced, the novelist, he wrote a novel about this scenario called Never Let Me Go In, which he imagined it was the technology was available in the 50s, and he wrote a sort of scene that was set in a boarding house where you gradually... like a boarding school, like a residential college, which you gradually realise was full of kids who were sooner or later going to be carved up for organs. And everyone found it horrific and dystopian, but I thought, this is bad really, compared to...
But it depends what you're lined up for.
It sounds good to the person getting the kidney. So, but I mean, it would stop... There's an illegal trade, a black market in killing people or drugging people and cutting out their kidneys and getting their organs. So it would at least stop that. But... Yeah, we can't be playing God like this.
How would you feel if you met your clone? I do wonder about that.
It's weird, isn't it?
I'd be quite interested to meet somebody and to see exactly which part of the was genetic and which part...
I think you would like your clone, but I just think... surely a clone's going to run amok and try and be the primary person. Kill the primary.
What if they take over? That happened in The Simpsons.
Right.
I was going to say, that must be a plot like Gattaca or something. That must be a sci-fi movie like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Revolt of the Clones. Revenge of the Clones. Yeah, something like that. Too much knowledge. Well, next, The Guardian, Nick. I think this will be the last one for this section. Yet another idea, which I had in the pub years ago, is likely to save humanity. It's baby gaunts all over again.
Yeah, solution to the climate crisis, mining the moon. And we've heard, of Bill Gates trying to block the sun and things like that. This is the idea that we'll mine the moon and shoot its dust to deflect the sun, basically, because the grains are the right size for scattering sunlight away. Another one of these terrible ideas that could easily end the world, basically. You know, that we're letting scientists do this stuff. But I'm a bit disturbed about it, especially this part. Termination shock, whereby temporary cooling is abruptly stopped and the world's left to rapidly heat up. So if you're pumping out this moon dust, then you suddenly run out or it stops for a day, the world goes, oh, and then rapidly gets hotter. I mean, it's a terrible idea. I don't know why they're
saying it's like as easily adaptable as a dimmer switch, but it sounds to me a lot more like a hotel shower. Controlling the temperature on one of those. You've got to get used to it. But, you know, I suppose if it depends how serious things are going to get. We're all, like, slightly naturally sceptical about climate change. And I'm not totally, but just I'm on that end of the normal spectrum. I'm not but if it does start to get serious, you know, it's good to know there are some things that we could have a...
But lockdowns were bad enough. Imagine trying to turn off the sun and turn it back on again. Carry on.
Yeah, totally. And, like, I mean, I'm from Scotland. I think the climate could do with a bit of changing. So it doesn't worry me.
Maybe more of it could be deflected that way.
Yeah.
I remember space mirrors being discussed very early on, you know, but I don't know quite... I suppose it's a question of scale, isn't it? We tend to exaggerate in our minds how large a mirror could be that would be between us and the... Of course, nuclear war is a potential way of raising a lot of dust.
Oh, that's good. That's looking like it's on the horizon. So
absolutely.
Always upsides.
Baby gaunts. I'm disappointed, by the way. None of you asked me what baby gaunts are.
What's a baby gaunt?
Baby gaunt's an idea I had when we have babies and they make a mess feeding themselves with spoons. Instead, you give them... They're a bit like, catcher's mitts in baseball. The babies wear them and they can just sort of, like, scoop gloop into their faces with their little... They're like webbed hands.
Like a hand?
But webbed.
Have you patented this? Have you patented this?
I haven't known. There's a similar one which is for ears as well. You wear them in the cinema. They're just literally like big ears.
You can get them.
And they create a much better acoustic experience.
You can actually get them.
Can you?
Yeah.
What, when you go to the cinema? Or
no, just for people who are hard of hearing or if you want to
for me,
focus
what you would have is you go to the cinema and they'd be free, but they'd all be advertising another movie that's coming up. So you put them on and they're on a little like band like that and they just couple your ears and that eliminates the sound of
Be good for Disney films.
If anyone with money to waste is watching, maybe pick up Simon's idea and invest.
Tell you, it's going to happen very suddenly when it comes. That's part 3 over. Join us after the break as Shakespeare's globe goes woke, it says, stays woke, I'm afraid, as AI Seinfeld is done for transphobia and the worst place to go on a date. See you very shortly.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instinct was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners, our final and quirkier section now. Thursday's Times. Leo, another day, another infuriating content warning on a timeless classic. Yes. They came for 40 Towers.
Yeah, and Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. It keeps doing these, putting warnings on plays. So now they've put a warning on Midsummer's Night's Dream, saying it contains misogyny, sexual references, violence and racism. I mean, they've got to stop trying to make plays sound interesting and exciting.
It's a play.
That's what I call the royal flush. Carry on.
yeah. It's that's the daily. That's what I'm called daily on Twitter. But yeah, they say. I mean, some of the words they say the word Ethiop. They say it's a racist term for somebody from Ethiopia, which I've never heard of it described as a racist term before.
It could be a term for somebody from Ethiopia, but it's hardly racist, is it? It's just using the country of their origin.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly worse.
To the point, and I mean broader. I've never actually been to the Globe to see a production. I know they do some sort of quite decent ones, but my understanding was they were trying to get back to the kind of earthier, the groundlings, people queuing up outside and just standing there for a fiver. It was supposed to be to restore the vulgarity to Shakespeare, to rescue it from the polite drawing room culture.
That's all gone. It's just where literary criticism and academia went wrong is when they tried to impose these political readings. An annoying professor here says it's a funny play, but it can gloss over the problematic gendered and racialized dynamics. I mean, what are you talking about? The 1590s are being accused of being racist.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Puck dealt with all this. At the end, he said, if we shadows have offended, think but this and all is mended. And, you know, when he says it's a dream, at the end, he said, what did he say? Whatever, I can't remember the exact quote, but he said it's
just a dream, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So he dealt with that. Shakespeare was already saying, at the time, this could be offensive, but deal with it, you know, woke fool.
Well, Professor Vanessa Corradera, the one you regarded as you just quoted on that, has written a book about playing Othello in a post-racial America. So I think it's fair to say she's got the grift going on. Yeah. Anyway, Nick, reassuring news now in the Times for cancelled comedians. It can happen to robots too.
Yeah, this is AI-generated Seinfeld parody banned for transphobia. So I watched some of this. It's called Nothing Forever. It's a very disturbing, strange parody. It's just a weird robot people, you know, AIs come out and say sort of disembodied joke, and they just say the punchline of a joke, and the audience laughs. A bit like Leo's set, no one knows where the jokes are supposed to be. I'm sorry. It's quite strange because ChatGPT is obviously really woke. It won't do a poem that's pro-Trump, but it will do a pro-Harris and pro-Biden poem and all these kind of things.
Right.
And yet it's come up with this transphobia in the show where the AI said, I'm thinking about doing a bit about how being transgender is actually a mental illness, or how all liberals are secretly gay and want to impose their will on everyone, or something about how transgender people are ruining the fabric of society. This is what the AI comedian said.
This sounds like my show.
Yeah, exactly. And then Twitch, of course, have had to take it down, and they've got a suspension.
So the joke when the Jerry Seinfeld type AI says that is only the room empties and everyone goes home because that stuff isn't funny. That's how he says it. That's in his routine. But Twitch itself is an AI which identified the transphobia but didn't understand that it was being done by an ironic AI. So basically, one chatbot has cancelled another chatbot now.
This is great. So we don't even need to get our hands dirty getting cancelled. We can just sit back and our robots go to war on our behalf. Amazing.
I watched a few minutes of this it's on YouTube if you want to see it, having been kicked off Twitch. It's absolutely dreadful. I mean, it may be only 6 months before it overtakes, I don't know...
Us on Headliners.
Let's say away for a while, yeah.
Killing.
Leo, Australian news now in the Daily Mail, and has LGBTQ finally jumped the shark?
So they've got a very divisive shark that's covered in a pride flag. So a shark statue decked out in the rainbow LGBTQIA++ 2P flag
TBC.
colours. Representing it's also got colours representing ethnic minorities. It's been slammed as garbage by a prominent politician. That was an Australian accent. However, the Australian Museum in Sydney said staff have been blown away by an outpouring of love for its exhibition named Progress Shark. I'm surprised they used a shark because, of course, they're known for being great whites, which is a very problematic phrase.
Do you know what, though? If you look at it, it looks so... It's actually a good metaphor for wokeness, because on the outside it looks ridiculous, but it's actually incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
See? And also, the other thing is, like a shark, it has to keep moving forward relentlessly.
It's an extraordinarily... Because, you know, that was the same flag, the Progress flag, that Lawrence Fox of this very station rearranged into a swastika.
Why remind people so?
But I think the shark is actually a much better use for it. I think that is extraordinarily powerful. I would like to see... I want one of those dangling from my rearview mirror now. Nick?
I'm glad you said mirror.
Pointless survey news now in the Metro. There are circumstances in which a funeral is a better date than a McDonald's, it seems.
Yeah, so McDonald's voted second worst place to go on a first date. The worst is the woods. The worst has actually been voted as the cinema. So this was Tom Bowler, for some reason, asked 11,000 of their players...
Was that old joke, you're having a rubbish time, I've got to walk back this way alone?
That's funny. Kind of thing I would say on a date. But yeah, so they're saying McDonald's is only second, cinema is top. Some quite surprising ones in there. Attending a funeral was in there. Who has been on a date? A funeral? I sound like a Seinfeld now.
You would bond, wouldn't you? I mean, it would be quite a real thing to do.
Also, there's free food.
Yeah,
there's free food, so it's cheap.
Singing together.
Yeah.
People have criticised going to the pub. So funeral, pub was voted worse than funeral. But I think going to a pub's perfectly reasonable. Am I some sort of...
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think people just struggle to answer these things seriously. Let's squeeze the last one in. We've got a minute left. England's top 50 worst places to live revealed, Leo.
Yes, they've revealed the worst places to live in the UK, and the top one's Luton. I think it's often...
I was born in Luton.
Really?
It's been down
You moved out.
Since, yeah.
You moved out, yeah. And then Peterborough, Portsmouth, Slough. But then it gets on to... I mean, they're all terrible places. But then Aylesbury... Aldershot, that's quite nice. Andover, I mean, Swindon's a bit of a hole.
It's all right.
Bournemouth is amazing. It's beautiful. It's at number 9.
Kensington and Chelsea is at number 15. Kensington and Chelsea.
Henley-on-Thames is number 13.
Although I noticed Cumbria nowhere in there, because we're legends. But
no real towns, I suppose. That's the problem, isn't it? Just villages and bridges.
Yeah, sheep can't fill in a questionnaire.
That's all for tonight's show. Thank you to my guests. Let's take another quick look at Thursday's front pages. Before we go, the Daily Mail. Now give him the wings he needs for freedom. Telegraph. Give him wings for freedom. iPaper, UK warns Putin, we may send fighter jets to protect Ukraine. Mirror, give us your wings of freedom. Times, give us our wings of freedom. And finally, the Daily Star. Order of the Wazzocks give MPs not their wings of freedom, but a medal and £162,000 payout when they are booted out. So you'll never guess, MPs. Those are your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you very much to my guests, Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. Headliners is back tomorrow night with Nick the Big Dog Dixon in the hosting seat, Scott Kapuru and Josh Howie. And remember that if you are watching the 5 a.m. repeat, stay tuned for the breakfast show just after the break. Have a great day. Good night.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no